Hello and welcome to Real Definitions. On this channel, I like to discuss the English language and how it's used in politics today. I also cover a litany of other political issues here and there. So if you like what you see, please hit that like and subscribe button. So today, I want to talk about the Irish slaves. Now, for those who don't know, Irish slaves is a hot button topic and people arguing over whether the Irish were slaves or not. So a little background for those who don't know about this. So, in early America, or British America, before America was even formed, in the 1600s, Irish people came over from Ireland to work, or quotation marks, work, because it's the argument whether they were slaves or indentured servants. So, if you go online to Google, let me pull Google real quick, here we are, and you type in Irish slaves, you will get a bunch of fact checks that say, no, they weren't slaves, they were indentured servants. The Irish slave thing was a meme, discredited, blah blah blah. It goes on for a long time about how discredited it actually is, but really it isn't. So why do they do this? Well, they are simply playing a game of semantics. And what do I mean by game of semantics? Well, I blew it up for you. Semantics. The word semantics means the interpretation of the meaning of a word or sentence. So if someone says you are just with semantics, they are probably trying to tell you that you are avoiding the real issue involved in whatever it is you are talking about. So instead of responding to the substance of what was said, you may be focusing instead on arguing over the meaning of some word or phrase. People often quibble over semantics when confronted with a difficult or unpleasant topic to avoid dealing directly with it. And essentially, all these fact checkers are playing a game of semantics. They are trying to avoid the actual word itself, slavery, because they don't want to associate white people with slavery unless they are the slave holders. So let me look at one of these articles. I have a Snopes article here. Were the Irish slaves in America too? Now, this is very interesting because they use a lot of wordplay here. Like you're saying, wordplay, especially in politics, is they will avoid saying one word or leave another word out specifically, or use a very descriptive word to try and give meaning to something. Let's scroll down a bit. They say a mixture of true. What's false? Unlike institutional chattel slavery, indentured servitude was neither hereditary nor lifelong. Unlike black slaves, white indentured servants had legal rights. Unlike black slaves, indentured servants were considered property. Now, if I scroll down, this is the big issue. Indentured servitude versus chattel slavery. This argument goes all the way down to one simple argument, and that is real definition versus legal definition. So what do I mean by legal definition? Well, let me see if I can find it for you. Involuntary servitude is legal and constitutional term for a person laboring against that person's will to benefit another under some form of coercion other than the worker's financial needs, to which it may constitute slavery. Essentially, involuntary servitude and slavery are technically considered different. If we look up grass-fed, because grass-fed is a great example of real definition versus legal definition. So, the USDA definition of grass-fed. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration proposed standards to establish a benchmark for grass-fed claims. In 2002, originally grass-fed animals got at least 80% of their nutrition from grass, range, pasture, or forage. The USDA raised the benchmark to 99% in 2006 before finally settling on 100% in 2007. While the 2007 ruling may appear to have closed the case, the provision doesn't prohibit stockpile or stored forest confinement or the use of hormones and antibiotics. See, just because a country, a state, government, says this is the definition of that word does not actually mean that's the definition of that word. That is merely the legal definition of the word and not the actual definition of the word. So, really, my big argument here is, what is the definition of a slave? So, I have a couple definitions here for you, because, dictionaries argue with each other. Slave, this is from the Free Dictionary by Farflex, or was it Farlex? One who is owned as property of someone else, especially involuntary servitude. One who is subservient or to a controlled by another. Sorry, I messed that one up. Who is subservient to or controlled by another, his boss's slave. One who is subject to or controlled by specific influence. That's how, obviously, as the definitions go down, it gets a little more broader. If I go over to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, a person held in forced servitude. Very simple definition. Also, there's a couple other ones that get a little more broad as we go. Slave, this is from Oxford Learner's Dictionary. A person who is owned by another person and is forced to work for them. A person who is property of and wholly subject to another and forced to provide unpaid labor. So, those are the actual definitions of a slave. Now, the big argument is, do the Irish indentured servants, I'm doing quotes with my fingers, you can't see it, do they qualify as slaves under the real definition of slave? Well, let's actually look into Irish indentured servitude real quick. Alright. Irish indentured servants. Irish indentured servants were Irish people who became indentured servants in territories under the control of control of the British Empire, such as British West Indies, particularly Barbados, Jamaica, and Leeward Islands, British North America, and later Australia. Indentures agreed to provide up to 7 years of labor in return for passage to the New World and food, housing, and shelter during their indenture. At the end of this period, their masters were legally required to grant them freedom dues in the form of either land or capital, and indentured servant contracts could be extended as a punishment for breaking a law, such as running away, or in the case of female servants becoming pregnant. Now, read this next line very importantly here. Those transported unwillingly were not indentures. They were political prisoners, vagrants, or people who had been defined as undesirable by the English state. Penal transport of Irish people was at its height during the 17th century, during the Cromwellian conquest and settlement of Irish during 1649 and 1653. During this period, thousands of Irish people were sent to the Caribbean and Barbados against their will. So, slave or servitude against people's will, I believe that was wholly subject to another force provide unpaid labor. A person who is owned by another person is forced to work for them. A person held in forced servitude. One who is owned as property by someone else, especially in involuntary servitude. So I think, I don't know, this might sound crazy, but it seems like they meet the definition of slave. So should I just stop here and go? No, I'll delve in a little bit deeper for you. Let's see here. Let's go down to treatment. Once indentured, these servants had little control over their destination, as their contracts were sold to local planters on arrival. Ships were often overcrowded, and the mortality rate on voyages could be high. One ship which arrived at Barbados in 1638 had lost 80 of its 35 passengers, 23% to sickness by the time it arrived. In Barbados, an initial term of 4 or 5 years were common, but those who arrived as prisoners were sometimes sentenced to 10 years indentured servants. So just imagine this for you. So, actually, my hand. let me find the actual rest of the treatment for you here, because this is actually really interesting how they do this. If you actually look under Irish indentured servitude, they give you this form of treatment, right? But when you go to indentured servitude in British America, they actually show you a different form of treatment for them. See, this is them playing semantics for you. Let's see here. Develop. It should be under restrictions. If I last read it, here we go. Indentures could not marry without the permission of their owner, were subject to physical punishment like many young ordinary servants, and saw their obligations to labor enforced by the courts. To ensure uninterrupted work by the female servants, the law lengthened the term of their indentured if they became pregnant. But unlike slave servants were guaranteed to eventually release from bondage at the end of their term, they receive a payment known as a freedom dues and become free members of society. So, their treatment, not that great. But I'm actually going to go a little bit delve deeper into their treatment, because all these fact checkers always avoid it. So what if I go, let's see here. Nope, not that one, not that one. Wait, was it that one? Nope, not that one. Not that one. Here we go. No, not that one. So I have a bunch of these. All right. So this talks about runaway slaves and servants in the Virginia colonies. So it actually goes over quite a few different cases here. So let's go over this real quick. Runaway slaves and indentured servants were a persistent problem of landowners in colonial Virginia. They fled from abusive masters to take a break from work or in search of family members from whom they had been separated. Yes, this is something they don't go over in their little fact checks is if a family of Irish people were taken to America, they would have been separated. Something they don't like to talk about, but you know, that's them just leaving out language. Earlier court cases revealed that whites and blacks sometimes ran off together, but that punishment for the latter could be much harsher. As early as 1643, General Assembly passed laws to establish penalties for runaway slaves and servants, regulated their movement, identified multiple offenders by branding them or cutting their hair, and provided rewards for their capture. In October 1669, the Burges, I can't pronounce that, admitted that these laws have hitherto in great part proved ineffectual. So actually, we come down here, we will actually find specific cases. Let's see here. Here we go. Okay. In July 1642, such cases appeared before the colony's judges. The decision dated July 9th described 3 servants belonging to Hugh Gwynn who ran away to Maryland and were captured there. Victor, a Dutchman, James Gregory, a Scotchman, were each sentenced to be whipped and 4 years added to their indentured. The third servant, a Negro man named John Punch, was punished differently. Rather than take additional years, he was made a slave for life. Scholars have argued that this decision represented the first legal distinction between European slaves, or European and Africans, to be made in the Virginia courts. And that is true. This is where the legal definition of slavery and indentured servitude first comes in, is with the John Punch case. So let's go back to that article real quick. Now, the second date, July 22nd, 6 white servants and a black man were caught running away, and their punishment varied. While 4 of the servants received lesser sentences, the other 2 were ordered whipped and branded on the cheek with the letter R, and several years were added to their indentures. One of these men also sentenced to work for a year with a leg shackle, Emmanuel the Negro. So, let me just put this in your head real quick. Not all Irish indentured servants, quotation marks, were willing. They were forced to go over. And then if they tried to run away, they would be whipped and added more years. Does that not sound like slavery to you? It's like, here's the thing. When I bring up this argument a lot, people tell me, yeah, well, the Irish eventually got their freedom. Well, guess what? The definition of slavery doesn't actually care. The definition of slavery does not have a term limit to it. When someone is taken and forced in servitude against their will, that is slavery. That is the one thing that all these big articles over here and stuff, they like to leave that out because they are playing with words. So that's my big argument, is they are playing semantics. They are trying to mess with you. And there's also a lot more other runaways. There's also, let's see here. Where was it? No, not that one, not that one, not that one, not that one. Here we go. This is actually one where I found a list of different runaways here and there, and all the stuff they were paying people to go find the runaways. So there are plenty of runaways. You even find their punishments too, and their punishments were whipping and sometimes being branded, just like the John Punch case. It's like, people argue like, oh, well, you guys weren't treated like cattle. Well, it's like, you want to argue that? You want to argue who got it worse? Sure, we can do that. But then again, that argument can go back to Jewish slaves in Egypt. Are you going to compare picking cotton to building the pyramids? It's like, we want to play the game of who got it harsher. Sure, we can do that. But slavery, yes, it was slavery, 100%. But also, let me bring something up real quick for you, because I saw this in another one. Oh, boy, let's see if I can find it real quick. Just, see here. There's a really interesting one I saw. I think it was this one, where they really lie in their language a lot. Where is it? Here we go. I found it. Okay. Sorry, I know I lost that one for you. Okay, so this is really interesting. You gotta really pay attention to their language. It's really interesting here. So first thing you gotta realize is this is covering indentured servitude in Pennsylvania from the years between 1682 and 1820s. Pay very close attention to those years. Indentured servitude can be described as an arrangement in which one party agrees to serve another for a certain number of years in exchange for an initial payment or monetary outlay. In colonial and early Republican Pennsylvania, statutes governing the institution established both protections for and restrictions upon indentured service. Now, one thing I don't like about this is really interesting. This is how you know they're lying to you and are actively trying to rewrite history. They say early Republican Pennsylvania. But the thing is, These are between the years 1682 and 1820. The Republican Party didn't come to be until 1854. And before that, they were the Whig Party in 1834. So it's like the Republican Party didn't have anything to do with indentured servitude or slavery. They were made to go against slavery, but they purposely worded it this way, or they purposely put Republican Pennsylvania there to try and associate slavery with Republicans. See, everything is wordplay. That's what you gotta realize. You have to read between the lines. You gotta find out what is the definitions of actual words, and that's why this channel is called Real Definitions, because everyone out there in politics are playing with their language. So anyways, thank you for joining me here. If you like what you saw, please hit that like and subscribe button, and please share. Bye.